Good evening, Michael Garcia from the Hispanic Vote. I have the privilege of having the sheriff here of Broward County, Sheriff Tony. We're doing a few of these interviews with some of the constitutional officers and community leaders here in the county, really to address and give information to the county regarding this crisis that's going on right now with COVID-19. The sheriff is one of few people that I'll be interviewing, really just to get a background on what's going on here in the county. So I first want to thank the sheriff for coming in.
Yes.
We're going to give a little fist bump because
thank you for having
me. The social distancing. But before we get into the corona stuff, I want to give you guys a little background of the sheriff. So I'm going to ask him to give you I know personally a little bit more about him, but I want the community to know a little bit more about him as well. So we're going to let him talk about your background.
Sure. Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Michael, for having me. Thank Hispanic Vote for allowing me to come in and kind of share a story and give the community an update on what's been occurring. I know COVID-19 is a very real and imminent threat, and we're all kind of concerned of it. From a background standpoint, it's been over roughly 15 months now since I've been the commander of the Broward Sheriff's Office. It's been a huge honor and privilege. I'm the first African-American to hold this post, and we've had a lot of success. And I think early on, coming into the organization, there was a lot of wondering about, hey, who is the man? We don't know him. And so I'll backtrack and share, collectively, I've spent roughly 15 years in Broward County, whereas I started my law enforcement career in Coral Springs Police Department in the northwest part of the county. Had a tremendous time serving the community up there. I've ran the gauntlet pretty quick in my career and put in about 10 plus years in that organization. And early on coming in, I was able to acquire the position, being assigned to the narcotics division, worked on some RICO cases, disappeared for a while, then was able to come out and join the special operations component of our agency, doing all the real high-end, Hollywood type of policing, chasing down bad guys, going after suspects.
Jumping out of windows,
blasting through windows, a whole bunch of different things. And I had some success. Finally became a SWAT operator. I was the first African-American SWAT operator to join Coral Springs team. That was a great pleasure and honor for me to participate with those men, and worked my way through, was selected to be the field force, which is basically like the riot control commander for the agency for a very short period of time, but it was a huge honor to be selected for that. Moved forward, ended up becoming the first African-American supervisor in the history of the city at the police department, where I made the rank of sergeant. And so this was kind of my progression in performing well. During my time as a law enforcement officer, both as a detective, as a supervisor, and all these other different ranks, I had acquired an enormous amount of accommodations for performances, and it was just a great time there. I was awarded the department's Meritorious Award, which is the second highest honor. I had an incident where a young lady was being brutally beat and raped, and you joked about the glass. I had to break through some glass and shoot through and do some Hollywood stuff to help rescue that lady. Was awarded the Police Exceptional Police Commendation 8 times. For outstanding performances in the field and discovery and doing things that go above and beyond the call of duty. Was fortunate to be part of 3 team citations, both with our vice and narcotics, our SWAT team dealing with the hostage rescue situation we had when one of our officers was shot back in, I think it was like 2009. And then just continue to perform as best as I could, becoming an active shooter threat instructor for our agency. Received the department's administrative commendation for helping develop the active shooter research and training protocols for our organization well before the Stoneman Douglas shooting. And I think that's kind of where the pivot point happens in my career. I had took to doing all the active shooter training. I had served as an adjunct college professor for several years after I finished grad school, and had kind of a niche with developing curriculums and doing training. And I said, well, what if I develop my own training protocol, my own curriculum, copyright it, trademark it, and start teaching active shooter awareness to civilians in the community? Before you know it, it turned into a business model. I wrote my own business plan, established my own LLC with my wife, when we start going out and training. And it caught the attention of numerous Fortune 500 companies, some governmental entities. We worked with the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles for some stuff. We did some things down in Miami-Dade. And I ended up retiring from the police department and focused on that particular craft full time. And lo and behold, while I was retired and I was in South Carolina, partnering up with an organization up there, for my training company, and the shooting happened at Stoneman Douglas. And it was horrific. Friends of mine lost kids. I could see all the officers that I trained running into the schools, guys that I work with, that, they used to be on my squad. And I felt compelled that I needed to come back home. I said, I got to come back and help and see how I can rectify some of these problems. And just knocking on doors and talking to people and educating ended up resulting in me being one of 3 candidates interviewed for this position. I was successful, and the governor selected me, and here we are 15 months later.
How has the ride been in the last 15 months?
It's been challenging, but it's been smooth at the same time. You walk into an agency that has, now we're probably at around 5,700 employees. We're very unique in that we have law enforcement, we also have fire rescue, we have the Department of Detention, and we have a large civilian-based population of employees. And one of the things I was thinking is, how am I going to, one, come in and fix the issues? I knew the active shooter stuff, so that was easy. But I said, well, there's going to be much more deeper rooted issues, right? I heard the rumors about how the office had became so political and millions of dollars were mismanaged and used in ways that was inappropriate. And I looked at the construct. I said, how did that happen? How did that occur? And traditionally, every sheriff, when they come in, Michael, they bring their friends with them. They bring a whole crew, a support network. And what I noticed about that, I said, that impacts institutional knowledge, right? If I decided to bring a bunch of Coral Springs friends with me, they don't know BSO. And BSO is a monster, right? 5,500 employees. We cover half the county for public safety, both for law enforcement and
how
fire.
big is the budget?
We are hitting roughly $1 billion budget with a B, right? Mm-hmm. We're in the upwards of $970+ million. We continue to expand. We continue to grow as an organization. And so I said, to be effective quickly and to be able to perform exceptionally well, I would have to promote from within. I would have to promote the people in the organization. And so I came in with that approach, and by doing that, we've had over 400 promotions across all our departments. So law enforcement, Department of Detention, fire rescue, and they're BSO born and bred. Our command staff have roughly 500 years of experience. I'll say that again, 500 years of experience. So let's think about that. Bringing in that level of expertise cut my timeline in growing. I rely on my counsel to give me the institutional knowledge. And so with that, we've had success with, we have the most diverse command staff in 105 years. We have Latinos who are leading up in colonels and majors. We have more women serving in formal capacities of leadership. In fact, my number 2, my right-hand man, is a woman. It is Nicole Anderson. She's the undersheriff for the agency, 20 plus years in, just a rock star. So I get the boys and a pat on the back, but the reality of it is, it's the team that's getting this stuff done. They train me, they educate me, I support them, they support me, and that's why we've had so much success, over the last year.
One of the projects that I think you guys opened up, you broke ground in December, was the training facility.
Yeah, the training facility. So that huge project. It's been talked about for decades. Every administration comes in, they recognize there's a need for training. They need a training center, but there's never an allocation of funds towards it. And so I came in, and there was still talk, and I said, look, how do we get this thing going? I introduced all the top active shooter training into the agency. We are the best trained agency in the United States. No other agency has acquired the FBI certifications, Homeland Security, work with FEMA, and a multitude of other organizations. And so we have that. But I said, how are we going to sustain all this very high quality training without a training center? It's like, compared to, you can't be the New York Yankees without a Yankee Stadium, right? You got to have this both collective
You have to have the
group.
facility.
It's
just like a sports team, right?
That's it.
If you don't have a
I'm a
practice
sports
facility,
guy, so I can relate to that easy.
Yeah,
you got to have a good facility.
You got to have a good facility.
So we I've reallocated money that we had and put aside $35 million to build out this training center. We did the construct. It's going to be over roughly 90,000 square feet. It's going to have all the state-of-the-art shooting ranges and facilities. We'll be able to take vehicles up on that platform. We'll have modern-day camera systems and technology embedded into the classroom so that we can teach abroad and learn abroad, and just a whole facet of different things that we introduce in it. And it's not going to be just the top training center in the county. This will be the top training center in the state. So we're excited. This past December 2019, we broke ground. We're doing all the prep work. You go out in the back of our headquarters, and they're still digging holes and getting stuff ready. We're in contract elements and negotiations right now for our final build out. So we are still on pace for doing a lot of great things. And I think, again, that's because of the command staff that we had. They're all BSO born and bred. And they said, hey, Sheriff, we had this idea. We've been talking about it. How can we clean it up? How can we get it going?
So now you're seeing it come through. You mentioned certifications. I know, correct me if I'm wrong, BSO lost the certification, but now I got recertified. Tell me.
Oh, man. Yeah. So one of the things we dealt with when I came in was because of all the systematic failures and policy failures that occurred on Stoneman Douglas. The Stoneman Douglas committee basically had determined that we had a multitude of failures. Those failures were sent up to the accreditation group here for the state of Florida, and they revoked our certification. And that's like a huge slap in the face for an organization this big, to lose your certification.
Can you tell us a little bit what that certification is? What does it mean?
Yeah, so the certification standards for accreditation basically is like the gold standard for an organization to consider themselves in the top compliance aspect for law enforcement. And because we have not only law enforcement, we have the Department of Detention, it's really a larger certification overall. And so if you don't have that kind of standard, that stamp, you're not considered to be as much as a professional organization. In addition, it impacts our ability to acquire federal funding.
That was
federal funding. Yeah, federal funding comes into our organization. We receive millions of dollars in federal support, and to lose a certification put us at risk. And I knew that, so I said, how fast can we get this back? Again, our training staff, Major Steve Robson over there did a phenomenal job. Colonel John Hell in professional standards, and we put everything together in a packet and made all the corrections. And I literally went up with my XO, Major Ahmed. We took a trip up to Tampa. I addressed the commission in front of probably about a good 200 different law enforcement administrators from across the state. And I said, look, we are prepared to go now. We are ready to be evaluated. They looked at our packet, they concurred, and they said, we'll expedite your evaluation process, because once you are suspended or revoked, it normally takes several years to acquire.
Okay.
But they had enough confidence in our command, and we were in the process of that evaluation until COVID-19 came up, which kind of slows us down. It's a good segue to talk about some of COVID-19.
Good. That is a perfect segue.
Yeah. So
tell us a little bit of some of the challenges you guys are facing with COVID-19. What are you doing? Obviously, everyone's facing challenges and has to make some type of adjustment. But obviously, the first responders, law enforcement, is always out in the community. So that makes, I think, it's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, it is.
So please tell us.
Well, so no differently than anyone else in terms of how this is impacting us. We're all concerned. We all have fears. We all have some uncertainties as to how much this virus is going to impact us as individuals and our families. I think the difference is we are public safety professionals. We protect and serve, and there's no caveat to that. There's no stipulations or restrictions. We have to show up for work. And so I talked about how diverse we are as an organization with fire rescue, Department of Detention, and law enforcement, and communications, and our civilians. We had to put checks and balances in place to make sure we could safeguard ourselves and mitigate any harm. The first step would be all the personal protection equipment, gloves, masks, some of the core hand sanitizers, gowns, things of that nature. When I absorbed command, the last audit period that came into the agency that showed an inventory list, we only had about 4,026 masks total. And so fortunately, our command staff last year, we put forth and developed the Office of Emergency Management. I give all the credit to Chief Joe Fernandez over Fire Rescue. He came up to me, he said, Sheriff, I've been trying to get this established for years. It's been ignored. It's going to be vital for us to have one single source and director and staffing that could help us coordinate all those resources effective. So again, I said, guys, they guide me. I listen. I said, Chief, how much you need? How fast can you get it started? Basically wrote them a blank check, and they introduced the Office of Emergency Management. Why is that important for COVID-19? Well, our Office of Emergency Management is handling all the coordination and analyzing this virus, and they've been looking at it since December. And when it was in China, and it was a bigger issue outside of our national borders, and they said, hey, this might come here. We might have to face this. and they start looking at that inventory and they say, wait, this may be a problem. And so they automatically start shifting around, using funds to acquire the equipment, putting the things in place. We've already spent over $1.3 million on the equipment, and we won't stop spending because we don't know the predictability as to how long this will last. So that's kind of the opening point. Then we start looking at, look, how is this impacting our facilities? So we had to reduce personnel and population across all our districts, non-essential personnel, let them work from home from satellite. We also had to look at what can we do to put in safeguards and checks and measures to make sure no one was entering to work and maybe sick or presenting signs, just like you did when I came in here. For those of you, he took my temperature and played by the rules. Well, we were doing the exact same thing. We go through temperature checks. We have a series of questions related to evaluating whether or not someone had been out of country or they exhibiting signs of illness, so on and so forth, that has been designed out and recommended through the CDC and the Florida Department of Health. Consistent with that, we also start looking at, okay, what type of calls for service can we mitigate and reduce from having more contact, and how are we going to handle physical arrest? Having access to the jail and having control of the jail, I was concerned about impacting that population by an influx of arrests coming in. And so I communicated with all the chiefs of police across the entire county. We collectively agreed that the most fundamental thing and safe thing to do in terms of encouraging our personnel on the road would be to not make unnecessary physical arrests, the misdemeanor, the 2 grams of marijuana, the trespass, but instead writing a criminal citation, allow people to be still held accountable, but later on present themselves in court, versus taking someone off the street, putting them in the jail, and risking that jail population. What successes we've seen from that? We have roughly a 30% reduction in calls for service as they are. We also are right around about a 30% reduction in arrests. We're not taking people physically to jail. What has that done for our Department of Detention? Well, our Department of Detention is now at its lowest capacity rate than we've had in probably decades. We're sitting at around about 68% population. Where maximum capacity is a little over 4,000, so we have about 2,900, 2,800 plus inmates in custody and care right now. And by doing that, we have not had any type of significant spread. We've had a total of, I think, 9 inmates as of to date that had contracted the virus. Most of those who had contracted the virus were some of those last arrests that the county was making and bringing in. And so we put in quarantine measures, sanitation elements. Our medical provider for our Department of Detention is WellPath. Their medical team have been doing an outstanding job. And so we're managing a lot of different things.
So here's my question, because you guys have to take into the detention center whoever gets arrested, whether it be BSO, Fort Lauderdale.
Correct.
What other municipalities have
You're
have
right.
their own law enforcement. So you
But it
have
all
to
comes back to us.
It comes back to you. So if someone gets arrested in Coral Springs and have
That's
corona, and
That's right. And that's why before I launched our own administrative directives, the first thing I said was, let me get the chief of Coral Springs on the phone. Let me get the chief of Hollandale on the phone. Let me get the chief of Miramar, Sunrise, Coconut Creek, Margate, and got everyone on the phone and said, hey, this can impact all of us if we don't do this uniformly together.
Okay.
And then think about this. The last thing we want to do is have the jail population have an influx of people that's contracted COVID-19, because eventually we're going to have to take them out of the jail and transfer those people over to the medical providers, and then we burden our healthcare system. So you have to have strategies and forethought of, if I do X, how does this impact Y? And again, we have a great staff who's analyzed all that.
I have a question for you regarding, now I don't know if I'm going to be using the proper terminology. You had like a command center built.
Yes.
At
headquarters. Lessons learned from Stoneman Douglas. One of the things we had noticed as our response for the Stoneman Douglas tragedy was the inability to use technology effectively, especially when it comes to camera systems. There was a lot of confusion during that call. We didn't know if the shooter was on the first floor, if he was on the second floor, third floor. Is it happening now? Was this 10 minutes ago? And so I basically reallocated collectively about $3 million to build out what's referenced as a real-time crime center. Our real-time crime center, the RTCC, is comprised of detectives from both our agency within our threat management division, but we also contract out and support services with the Secret Service and the ATF, who have dedicated personnel inside there. And what the threat management does inside the Real-Time Crime Center is they analyze any type of threat that may be coming in. There was a time where the agency had failed in its investigative practices as it relates to the shooter from Stoneman Douglas. And so what we try to do is make sure all that information, the threat comes in, someone says they're going to shoot up a school, we track it down, we invest every single tool that we have to analyze that threat. The Real-Time Crime Center currently is staffed with the state-of-the-art technology from camera systems and monitors, which is tied into currently roughly 10,000 cameras across 260 schools here in Broward County. We partnered up with Superintendent Runcie. Shout out to him for our support efforts and partnership we were able to establish. Signed an MOU. We have that agreement with them, and so now if we receive a threat in a school, the first thing our Real-Time Crime Center does and our detectives and the threat management does, they pull up all the camera feeds inside of that school. And they start tracking and monitor what's happening inside of building 1200. They're looking at the first floor, second floor, third floor. We're analyzing the parking lot, and we got some really cool tools I can't talk about where we're able to track some unbelievable things we can do in this system. And we've mitigated both violent offenders. We've made arrests not only at the localized level, but the investigative tools have led to arrests in both Saudi Arabia and the UK. So this is a huge tool that we have, and we're still building upon it.
So here's a question that I think some people may be concerned, and I think you said this, but I want to clarify. Those cameras only turn on when there's a crime. It's not kids are being monitored.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's a very key point, and it was a key point for both the superintendent and the Broward Teachers Union and many others who were participating in analyzing, hey, how is this going to work? And we're not the CIA. We're not there just, I guess in short, we have no interest in examining a kid take a math test. And I can tell you the detectives would not want to do that. And they're busy doing other investigative things. However, it's pivotal for when we get a 911 call from a school that there's a potential shooter or there's a threat, that we have the ability to go live feed into those camera systems.
Okay.
And I would tell you, if you walked into our Real-Time Crime Center on a visit during the middle of the school year, non-COVID-19, just a standard school year, you would see our detectives and some of the special agents with the Secret Service and the ATF working the investigative side of things, where someone was talking about threatening and tracking and monitor different suspects in terms of real legitimate threats. You won't see a large volume of school cameras on. You may see one or two detectives working something because that came in as a legitimate threat.
How many BSO sheriffs do you have right now?
Total sworn deputies combined, we have over 2,000 in Department of Detention, another 1,500 plus in the law enforcement realm, and then we have another just under 800 or so firefighters.
Do you have any? I think this was an issue before as to you had openings that you needed to fill.
Yes, we still have some vacancies, but here's the thing: upon accepting command, one of the things I noticed was that we didn't have a dedicated recruitment department, and we were kind of just relying on people to just come into the organization. That's a really poor strategy because it impacts attrition. It impacts our ability to provide really full volume service of patrol capacity in the field. And so we had over 150 plus different vacancies at the sworn law enforcement position. I reallocated several positions. I created a major down there, Andrew Dunbar. I'm sure you probably met him. He does a great job down there.
From Lauderdale Lakes.
Right. He was a captain, bumped him up, this guy squared away. So he's taken the command of HR, put forth a full recruitment strategy and plan. We're going out to diversify on not only the administrative levels, I can handle that by promotions, but we also want our baseline patrol deputies to look like Broward County. And so we gone through cross sections of bringing in military personnel, going out to the Latin community, going out into the black community, going out to historical black colleges and things of that nature under the recruitment strategy to cut those numbers down. And we also built out a pre-academy where we're bringing young people in so that we can start training them early to become full cadets and then therefore reducing the numbers. And here's how effective this has worked. We had about 150 vacancies. That's almost a whole city deficiency. Coral Springs is 200 cops, just to give you a reference point. We have about 150 deficient vacancies. As of right now, we're almost at 95% capacity. And another shout out, the academy is held and run over at the Broward College. And thank God for Greg Hell, President Greg Hell over there, and Linda Wood, Director Linda Wood, because I sat down with them and I said, hey, I'm in trouble. I have 150 vacancies. I have to fill this fast. I can't afford to do a melting pot of academy classes. Traditionally, an academy class would have 5 Coral Springs, 5 Fort Lauderdale, 5 BSO. And since I've accepted command, we have been doing full BSO classes at 35 members per class. Why? This is why we're at 95% capacity. And hopefully, as we get through COVID-19, we were on track for July, may push us back a month or two. Come August, this will be the first time in decades that we'll be at full capacity.
One last question before you go. What is the biggest issue that BSO faces? Outside of COVID-19, what is the biggest challenge that you guys are facing in the future? Whether it be budgets, obviously it's not going to be staffing because now you're...
Sure.
Yeah.
Consistency. The most fundamental thing that will impact this organization is consistency. And what I mean by that is, here I am coming into an election season, and we've made and rectified so many deficiencies. We've advanced the agency and done a lot of great things. But for every new administration that comes in, it changes. And maybe the next person that comes in after me doesn't have the same sincere commitment towards public safety and law enforcement, and hit the reset button. And we lose those 400 people that were promoted. That's going to impact the organization. We lose the concept of focusing on public safety and not being so politically oriented. I had a editorial board, I think with the Sun Sentinel, where I made this comparison. If you look at the history behind how this office has been run, there's always an 80-20 split in what the sheriff as an individual focus on. And that 80 has traditionally been politics, and 20% has been the public safety. And we've learned some hard lessons. People literally have died because of that. Keep in mind, for all the things we talked about in terms of what we've been able to accomplish as an organization during my administration, we didn't request one extra penny. This was all budget monies that were already there. So I think consistency and also being innovative to make sure we meet the upcoming challenge. And there's been a lot of good lessons learned from COVID-19 about preparation and having stockpiling and things of that nature. And we got some new things coming forward that I've been designing and working with our team on in terms of new department to help mitigate a lot of threats we face here.
So I want to thank you. I know you're a busy man, especially during these times, but I appreciate you coming out, giving us an update as to what's going on with BSO with COVID-19. So with that being said, thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.